The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to the Fine to Fab Show with Lisa Lieberman-Wang, helping women reclaim their inner peace and power, going from feeling fine to being fab, fabulous, awesome, beautiful, serving to empower you to break through the barriers that weigh you down, to live an authentic life that is healthy, happy, and free. Now, here's Lisa.
Welcome. I'm Lisa Lieberman-Wang, your trusted guide on your journey from feeling fine to being fab. The Fine to Fab show is committing to helping women break through the barriers that weigh them down to live an authentic life that is healthy, happy, and free. I hope you join the movement and become part of the community. You can do so by texting us at 90210, that's 90210, and text the keyword Fine to Fab, and we'll update you on what's coming up next. Follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter at Lisa Lieberman-Wang, or visit our website to check out the blog, upcoming events, and free webinars at fine2fab.com. I'm excited about today's call. If you want to be able to be speaking with me live, you can call in at 561-422-4365. And you can Skype at W4WN Radio and join the conversation. So today I thought it'd be neat to do something completely different, and instead of interviewing somebody about the journey they've taken, I thought it'd be apropos to really tell the untold story of Fine to Fab. Like, where did it come from? Because looking at me now, I had a long history of eating disorders, depression, therapy, medical challenges, countless hospitalizations, and after enormous amount of money spent looking for the answer, I finally figured it out. But for most people, they'd see me now and never have any idea that I've ever had a challenge, because I've done a really good job of covering it up, making sure it was never an issue, even while I was going through it. It's been 20 years since I've stopped doing depression, compulsive overeating, binge eating, bulimia, and self-sabotage, and I've lived a life free of internal struggles. But I know there's still a lot of women out there that are still fighting the battle, and really we need to help you stop. And the time we spend together in this show, as well as others, is really an exploration of mind, body, and soul. You know, what keeps you from getting what you want and the promises you give yourself, yet a lot of us are so great at taking care of other people, but not ourselves. So the foundations we'll explore is really what it takes to be able to live a joyous, happy life free of the internal struggles that repress all the things we really want. And in this program, you'll learn the tools of inquiry, presence, peace, power, and self-love that are the basis of the journey itself. Rather than getting rid of your conflicted relationships, you'll learn to become aware of what's standing in your way, just as I did. I spent most of my life thinking there was something wrong with me, and found out that there was nothing wrong with me. There was just something wrong with some of the ideals and rules and beliefs that I had taken on that weren't even mine and needed to be readjusted. The basic themes that you'll hear over the coming weeks will be everything from discovering that no situation or feeling is unworkable, learning to cherish yourself, understanding how long-lasting change actually happens, and learning not to abandon yourself when you're in pain, which so many people do, and identifying your pattern of eating, working, spending, or any form of self-sabotage. It's not always about the food or the drinking or the other things. Those are just the symptoms, but redefining and refining a way of eating, living, and loving that's tailored to suit your body, your needs, your feelings in your life. So I look forward to having you part of the movement, from going from fine to fab and reclaiming your inner peace and power now. A lot of my untold story comes from even where fine came from. See, I spent a typical life. I say I grew up in a traditional middle-class family. I really like to call it a traditional dysfunctional family, because if you can show me a functional one, I'd be more interested in that. I think that would be the anomaly, that there isn't any. But it's what we've classified today. We've watched TV over the years thinking that things had to be a certain way. We have ideals and beliefs. You look at ads out there telling us who we're supposed to look like, what we're supposed to look like, what size we're supposed to be, how pretty we're supposed to be, and what even defines pretty and beautiful has been always an interesting thing for me, because a lot of the times we're looking at something that wasn't even set by us of what we're supposed to achieve or what our ideals are. And for so many, it's what's been put out in the advertising and the TV and the media that's told us what becomes successful, what becomes beautiful, what it is. And I grew up in a home with really loving people, but didn't necessarily know how to love themselves, or even the family for that matter in some ways. And I watched the challenges, not just with my immediate family, but, generations to generations, and how everybody dealt with different things. And while I was going through it, I can tell you I wasn't watching, I was in it. But today, in a perspective stepping back, I see things so differently, which I wish I saw earlier, and today you can see it, and you can be a little bit more abreast of what's going on in your life. And you might just even, look at what I'm sharing and observe in your own life where there might be some parallels. When I was growing up, my whole family had weight challenges. There were in every diet program there was Jenny Craig's and Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem and the Shaklee diet and this diet and that diet. And I even remember being like 9 years old and my dad taking me to a Nutrisystem class that he was going to, because I used to help out with the cooking at home, and he wanted to make sure that I knew what we're supposed to be eating and what we're supposed to be preparing. But in between every diet was chocolate chip cookies and Entenmann's cakes and Freihofer cookies and ice cream and different things. So I actually had a roller coaster of eating right and eating wrong, eating right and eating wrong. And if I look at it now, I wonder what was going on with the family, being I didn't control the food that came in at the time. I have no idea, but I saw the progression as it went, and that to me became normal. Like it became normal to just, have ice cream every night. It became normal that we'd always have desserts in the house. And, you think about what you grew up with. And then, at the same time, that was normal, and also was being on a diet was normal. It was never about a lifestyle. It was never about eating for life or eating healthy all the time. It was about being on something temporarily. And I remember that my mom used to say, she was heavy, and she always used to say, baby, don't ever look like me. And I had such a fear of being heavy and being sick, because she had a lot of medical challenges and had a hard time. And I mean, the family was always on her about losing weight and having to look a certain way, and that was pressure. And think about it, anything anybody tells you to do, you never want to do it because it's not your choice. And I saw her battle for years, so it was always a fear of mine, but yet I had a sweet tooth. And I used to not just have candy, but steal candy and hoard it under my bed, or go to the 5 and dime, and when you can get candy for a penny, I would be buying all the candies and hiding it in my closet, in my drawers, under the bed. And it was always about sugar, always wanted the candy. And the irony about it is I also always related it to being with my family, because the best times I was able to remember were the times when we were eating. So whenever I was looking for something just to feel comfort and support, I'd always go back to the food. And today I can tell you that in a logical sense and in a conscious sense. But back then, I don't know that I knew what was going on. I just knew that I went to it. And by the time I was 16, I thought I would be obese. I really did, because it was such a fear in the family. My family wasn't 10, 20 pounds overweight. There was like 50, 60. My mother, today has lost 130 pounds, but you could imagine the struggles. And my dad's probably lost the same 50 pounds only 100 times over, so let's say 5,000 pounds over a lifetime. So you think about it, and seeing the up and down, my brother and I both vowed we'd never be that way. And I thought that was not going to be part of my path, because I saw the struggles they went through, but it turned out that it was. And before you know it, by the time I was 18, I had ulcers, I was sick, I ended up being hospitalized. My dad used to ride a motorcycle, and he was an engineer, liked his bike on the weekends, and I'd go riding with him. And And one day I'm getting on the back of the bike, and I literally collapsed because I was so weak. My potassium was so low. I had what they called at the time a sudden heart attack, and I was only 18 years old, and they rushed me into the hospital. And before you know it, I'm being pumped with IVs and all this stuff's going on. And I mean, this started as ulcers. Months before, I go to the doctor and I was stressed. I was in school, started college. There's a lot of stress going on. And the doctor just said, don't be stressed. And I think that was interesting, and put me on Tagamet, the anti-acid type products, prescription, and sent me home. In 30 days, I had lost over 30 pounds. I ended up being a sickly 95 pounds in a hospital and lost anything that resembled me. And before you know it, it became the journey of 13 years of being sick and hospitalizations over and over again. And I'm not talking about for a couple of days. I'm talking about months and months and months of doing that. And it turned out that it just got worse. And before I knew it, I'd gone in at 18, not really knowing much. I started playing with the IV that they put in my arm and didn't realize that I had touched something wrong. I thought it was just loose, the little thing that rolls on it. And I have 30 doctors around me, asking me why I was trying to kill myself. And I was totally like, what are you talking about? I wasn't trying to kill myself, but it led to such a series of mishaps and situations that I ended up on suicide watch. They wouldn't let me leave. I was admitted under my own free will, but then I had to write a letter to get out, and I wasn't even able to get out without them going through assessments, and I had to wait 3 days to do that. And before you know it, back then, I didn't know what this was. They said to me I couldn't keep anything in my body, not food, not water, nothing. And I just had automatic gag reflux, and they said to me through the time of surveillance, do you have control over this? And control over what? I didn't understand. And what they were saying, you have control over, you keeping the food or keeping the liquids and so forth. And it didn't feel like I did because I was so acidic and it was so painful to have anything in my body, let alone even water. But they gave me something that they didn't know at the time was going to be a very dangerous tool that I ended up pursuing and using, because I found that I was able to eat whatever I want and get rid of it. And there was one other piece that I didn't realize, is that when I was rolled in to the emergency room, my dad said to me, I love you. And I don't know that he ever said that before. Had he said it, I never heard it. But one thing I did hear, when he said it, I heard that when I'm sick, people are nice to you. So I ended up staying sick for a very long time, because when I was sick, no one fought. No one was saying a disparaging word. They weren't mean. And I said, oh, my God, if this is what it takes. And again, it wasn't conscious. I just found that it was so much easier, at least that's what I thought, to stay sick. So I did. And I was in and out of hospitals. I ended up finding out what I needed to do. Back then, they didn't know how to deal with this. This is over 30 years ago, and they didn't know how to deal with disordered eating or eating disorders or anything else. And before I know it, they're putting me on prescriptions for depression and high blood pressure and other things. And by the time, I'm in my 20s, I'm already up to 13 prescriptions a day. I feel like I was a zombie, never felt good. Ended up getting into hospitals they didn't know how to treat. They started putting me in psychiatric wards with people that really had challenges, where I was there with schizophrenics and paranoid people and people that were very, very challenged, very sick mentally. And here all I was challenged in my mind with just food. And they didn't know how to treat it. And unfortunately, I went through many, many years of this, where I'd be put into a hospital for a week, which became a month, which became 6 weeks, and it just became progressive. And it still seems to be something that's insidious that people haven't figured out. You look at it, and what I did is I found out what I needed to do to get out every time. And even getting into the hospital was a big deal, because insurance didn't even want to cover eating disorders or other challenges like that, or even depression. They'd cover therapy, so my family put me in therapy. Eventually got admitted because I was so ill that I couldn't function, that they admitted me. But when they did, they put me into these hospitals that just treated the symptom. They didn't treat the problem. They wanted me to gain weight and eat and hold my food. And I said, okay, what do I need to do to get out of here? And that became the plan, is how do you get out of here versus how do you get better? And statistically today, there's so many places with eating disorder clinics and units and lifestyles. I was just watching the news, and I was on Fox 5, and they had a story about the statistics, because there's over 24 million women with eating disorders, and there's 10 million men. And it just scares you to even think that there's so many. And actually, I found different numbers. That's what they said on Channel 5. I had found there's 24 million people with disordered eating, and that could be everything from compulsive overeating, binge eating, emotional eating, just starving yourself periodically, bulimia, anorexia, binge eating. They call it BED, B-E-D disorder, and that's like that. But then there was like 10 million, what I heard, with eating disorders of anorexia, bulimia, and where compulsive overeating clinically diagnosed, and 1 million men. The numbers are staggering, and the worst part is that it's one of the highest causes of death because it's not seen or treated properly. And unfortunately, I saw several people over those years that were admitted but never got out, because it wasn't treated properly and people didn't know how. They just tried to get the food under control. That, again, was the symptom. The statistics that I had just heard was that in inpatient treatment, less than 60% of the people actually get help. Less than 60%. And 20% get some relief. But here's the irony, 40% fail. And I was part of that 40%, and I never considered myself someone that would fail, and yet I failed miserably because I had to do it 5 times and still came out and was unsuccessful. Where I would come out, I'd be good, I'd go to Overeaters Anonymous, I'd go to therapy, I'd do everything they told me to do, but I was white-knuckling it, couldn't deal with the way things were going, and I found myself turning to food just to stuff the feelings and to get out of pain, but it never got rid of the situation. It just numbed me long enough to be able to get to the next point and then to do something else. And it was very interesting to see how this thing I was going through is not uncommon. There were so many people doing it. The only difference is they're doing it the way I did back then, and it's a secret. So you might know someone right now that you think, they're always worried about their weight, but you don't know there's an issue. I just want to give you some things to think about and clues that will let you know something's going on. Do you know anybody who's very heavy, but you never see them eating? Well, here's the clue. Nobody gets heavy by not putting something in. It's GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. We put stuff in, that's how come we get heavy. But there's a lot of closet eaters, binge eaters, compulsive overeaters, emotional eaters. They'll eat normal in front of you, but privately they're binging because there's no coincidence. There's a lot of people that are bulimic, and you'll never know. They're the hardest class because of the fact that most of them are about 5, 10 pounds overweight, sometimes 20 pounds, because what they're doing is they're binging, they're eating everything in sight, and then what they do is they get rid of it. So maybe during the meal they're getting up to go to the bathroom a couple of times. They come back, they'll eat more. Maybe they're always brushing their teeth, using breath mints. That's what I did. So I never wanted anybody to know, so I'd always have my toothbrush and my toothpaste, and I'd go to the bathroom and I would almost like they wouldn't know. Or I did a lot of it in the closet. In other words, when people weren't watching, I wasn't literally in the closet, but that might have been another idea had I not had other places to go. But it is insane. It's an insidious disease. And dis-ease just means dis-ease with oneself. It's when you're not comfortable with yourself. And then there are the people that starve. They starve themselves. They don't think they're deserving, so they don't even want to feed themselves or give themselves anything, so you never see them eating. And then there are the people that, will eat normal, but then they go into a binge. There's so many cycles of this, and you probably know people that are like this. And a lot of times the food just becomes the way to soothe the pain and to just make you feel better. And I always call it the I feel better. And it's that moment of reprieve, but then the reality comes of, I just put on 5 pounds. I just consumed 10,000 calories. This is ridiculous. Now I hate myself, and I feel gross, and I'm fat and disgusting, and I'm just angry at myself, which just makes it even worse. So it's such an insidious disease. some of the side effects of doing it, I ended up finding that I ended up becoming bulimic, which means I binged and purged to the point where it got so bad that even when I had like 6 months of abstinence from hurting myself, as soon as I went and had one bad moment, in other words, I picked up the wrong food, I wasn't in a good place, I found myself, just one more. Before I knew it, I'd be eating the whole thing and the whole cake went away or the whole gallon of ice cream was gone. And it just turned out that I didn't know how to deal with things. The worst part about it is when I put it down, when I picked back up, I picked up exactly where I left off. So in other words, if I was at the point where I was consuming 5,000 calories in a sitting, the next one was 6. And then the next one was 10. It got so bad that I was literally binging and purging 18 times a day. I don't know how I functioned, but I did. I ended up getting interns with IBM, and then I was working for MCI and having an incredible career. I had my own computer consulting at one time, and no one knew what I was doing. This was all a secret. I found that a lot of successful women that are successful in some areas but not with themselves will go home and beat themselves up, never let anybody else know what's going on. And it always came down to one common denominator. It was like never feeling like you were good enough. I never thought I was good enough. I never thought I was pretty enough, smart enough, thin enough. I was never good enough. And it's like, then where's the measurement? Where was the benchmark of what good enough equates to? I mean, that's really one of the biggest challenges is that, whose standard are we even looking to fill, and where does that come from? So after failing all these times and really failing to success in some case, I realized that I needed to find something different because they had me going to OA, and then they found out that there were other secrets. And I also realized that a lot of the women and even men that are challenged are keeping secrets. And that's another untold. Like people think, nothing ever happened, or they were just happy and all of a sudden something happened. Well, I can tell you that statistically, there's numbers that say 90% of women have been sexually abused. And it doesn't necessarily mean they were raped or molested, but it does mean that they were violated in some manner, and that was not of their approval. It wasn't what they wanted to happen, and someone took advantage of them. And when you look at those numbers, think about how many people if not yourself, were in a position where somebody put you in a position you didn't want to be in. And that happened to me. I was on a date. I was young. I dated someone much older than me. I didn't even let my dad know because I figured he'd be angry. And unfortunately, this person took advantage of me, and I was afraid to tell him because now I went on a date I shouldn't have went on, and then I thought I was at fault versus this person was at fault and didn't understand the word no does mean no. But I spent years holding this secret in, and it wasn't until my 4th hospitalization that anybody ever knew that I was violated. And the irony about it is that I spent all those years thinking I did something wrong instead of realizing and understanding that somebody else did something wrong. Think about it. How many times do you blame yourself for something that happened that really was not necessarily your fault at that moment, knowing what you know? I mean, knowing what I know today, the whole situation would have been different. And the fact that I could even speak about it is only because of the fact that I don't see it the same way. I'm not playing the victim anymore. At the time, I was totally the victim. And as a victim, I felt powerless and I had no control. Today, I don't live in that place. There is nothing that I feel the need to be a victim of, and nor will I hold on to something that will hurt me. But a lot of times what we do, and I did this for years, something that happened once, I replayed that tape as if it happened every single day of my life. And I didn't say it out loud. I didn't tell everybody else, but I started playing a victim. And something shifted. It was no longer about opportunities and what I could have. It was like, oh, poor me. What happened to me? And it was, why me? And then I started blaming myself for everything that happened instead of looking for ways to be able to change what happened and to make it right. I made myself wrong. And too many times that is the underlying cause of disordered eating. So this has been an unbelievable journey for me, and I do have more to share, but before I do, I'm going to give our listeners a chance to call in and ask any questions that you have, and you can call in at 561-422-5787. 4365 or Skype in at W4WN Radio. And we're going to go to a commercial break, and then we're going to come back, and I think I see some callers coming in, so we'll go to a break and we'll come back with our listeners. Thanks for joining me.
Now that I have your attention, ladies, when you need help breaking through the barriers that weigh you down, turning to food is not going to help, and starving yourself along with ongoing feelings of helplessness and frustration will not help either. The cycle of self-sabotage, disordered eating, and stinking thinking has to stop, and there is no better way than with other smart, business-savvy women like you who are making the change with best-selling author, licensed master NLP practitioner, and trusted guide, Lisa Lieberman-Wang of Find2Fab.com. Lisa will help you get that breakthrough you've been waiting for. Go to Find2Fabshow.com right now for all the details of the life-changing 10-week transformational program and the special listeners promotion. It's time to turn your life from feeling fine to being fab. Fabulous, awesome, beautiful. Go to Find2Fabshow.com now.
Hello?
Welcome back. Who do I have here?
This is Heidi.
Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Awesome.
Am I supposed to ask a question?
Sure.
I know that sometimes, I've come a long ways that I don't abuse food the way I used to. But I know that sometimes it's so hard. You look at things and I think you do it mindlessly sometimes. You don't think about what you're supposed to be putting in your body, and you don't get to where you want to be, and then sometimes you backslide, maybe in your thinking, not as much as your habits, but in your thinking. What is a good way to keep maybe yourself on track, or what can I do to help me, to remind me when I do it? Because sometimes I do it without even thinking about it. I do something, I make a bad choice, and I caught myself doing it last night. I knew because I had something that was really making me nervous, and I caught myself eating something I shouldn't have in the volume I shouldn't have. And I sat there and looked at it, and I thought, what did I just do? And I wasn't even aware I was doing it. What can I do? Go ahead.
One of the things is I call that when we go into a trance, Heidi. It's like when all of a sudden, you find yourself someplace, and you're like, how did I even get here? You know better, and that's when our shoulda, coulda, wouldas come in. But the key is being able to break the trance before it happens. And what it is that if you know you're in a place where something's upsetting, something's disturbing happening, and your normal go-to would be food, then you need to have enough other alternatives set up in advance that you have as go-tos before the food. So for me, some of the things that I use is picking up the phone and calling a friend, because I know I need to get something out. I don't even need to talk about what just happened. I just need to re-divert my attention. Or it's practicing a moment of gratitude and breathing and taking some deep breaths and having water first before I go to the food, and saying, what am I grateful for? Or one of the biggest things I've used over the years, and I have a friend who hates when I do this, but she used to have a lot of challenges, and anytime she'd speak to me, she'd want me to go into the pity club, and I wouldn't go there, and I'd always say, compared to what? Like something was so awful, and I'd say, compared to what? Compared to kids in Africa who don't get to have more than one meal if they don't go to school because they don't have food, or compared to people who don't have a roof over their head, or compared to someone that's missing a limb. So compared to what? And I think sometimes when we put things in perspective of how good or bad it really is, it almost takes away the charge, or going for a walk, or doing something. I mean, a lot of times when there are situations I found, if I find myself turning to the cupboard or to the food or something, I usually have to walk out. I have to walk out of the room. I have to walk out of the house. I have to walk out of the situation. Whatever it is, I need to move. Does that help?
It does. I mean, it was something that I usually don't have in my house, and that probably didn't help. But I've never been, I don't want to say I never, because I probably have. It had probably been a very, very long time since that had occurred, and I was shocked. I was shocked that it happened. And I thought, what could I have done to waylay this particular situation? Because I was very surprised that it happened. But I'm like, I really like your compared to what that helps, because sometimes you get not overwhelmed is not a word that I'm looking for, but you forget that, or you need to be reminded to put it in perspective. And I think that's what happened. I didn't put it in perspective. I let it worry me, which is not something I've done recently. And instead of addressing the worry or thinking about, is the worry realistic, I let the worry overcome me.
And that's when we react versus respond, because when you have a knee-jerk reaction, it's more like, okay, that's an old behavior. And when we respond, it actually requires us sometimes to take a deep breath and to just really to be in the moment and then look at it almost like removing yourself from the situation and not being so close to it, but to step away from it and look at it with a healthier perspective. So for me,
and I think that's what happened.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's the same thing. The other day I had somebody had sent me flowers and a gift, and they sent me chocolate. And I kind of thought it was humorous because I'm not one to eat chocolates very often, but I do love my treat now and then. So I was talking to a friend, and I said, wait, I'm going to get a piece of chocolate. She says, you're having chocolate? I said, I'm allowed to have chocolate. Like, I wasn't doing it as a reaction or a bad thing. I just felt like having a piece of chocolate. But today, and this is not where I was 20 years ago, but today I can actually have a piece of chocolate and not finish the box. But years ago, you had to get that box out of my house. Like, it couldn't even exist in my home, because if it was in my home, it almost was as if it had its own voice, and I'd literally hide it from myself if that was possible, how crazy I was. I'd hide it from myself, meaning I knew where it was, and then later on I'd hear it calling me, and I'd go down and I'll have one, and then walk away, and then come back and have another, and then come back and have another, and before I knew it, I finished the box. And today I can honestly say I can have one because it doesn't serve the same purpose. Where when we're using it to stuff and to stifle a feeling, then it's not healthy. Versus we can actually have something just to enjoy it, a much better way to do it.
Yeah, and I think I'm not that strong yet. I happen to have it in my house as a treat from a celebration, and obviously I'm not there yet, where I have to have it out of my house unless
I always
ready.
And I used to send people home with their gifts. If people came and they brought cake or stuff like that, and even to this day I do, by the way, if it's something I really know I would enjoy and I'd go back to, and I just don't want to put it there to put myself subjected to it, I ask people to take it. I said, bring it to work tomorrow if you want, or bring it home for your kids if you'd like. But if they don't take it, it goes in my garbage. And my husband knows I even take dish detergent and I put it over it so that I won't go back and get it. And 20 years later, people go, are you kidding? What are you doing? But I know how insidious this can be, and I know that if I'm having, I don't want to ever be in a position to have a bad moment. So if I think something is not good for me, and for the first couple years of my marriage, my husband really thought I was crazy. He wanted to eat all kinds of what I consider unhealthy choices or things that would be totally delicious, but I know I couldn't control myself with. And I asked him not to bring it in the house, and he used to think I was joking. I said no, and it would disappear, and he'd go, how did you do that? Like, we'd go to Costco and get a whole thing of chocolate-covered raisins, and I'd finish it, and he'd saying, are you serious? I was like, absolutely. This is not allowed to be in the house if I'm not stable. So it doesn't come in anymore. So
yeah, and I think there's some things that I have, that I can have in my house that don't do that to me. And I didn't know this was one of those things.
Right. Get it out.
Yep, I have to get it out. So thank you. That really, compared to what really I should have done that's a very, I said should have. That is something I need to remind myself, maybe that needs to go on my refrigerator compared to what? Because I love that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. It really helps.
Thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate you calling in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. And I know we have another caller waiting, and who do we have there?
Hi, it's Jessica.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm great.
Awesome.
I was listening to everything you said, and it really answered a lot of my questions and reminded me of things. It's I find just hearing you talk about stuff reminds me of what I learned from you so much, and it really is helpful in terms of staying to the goal.
Thank you. And I know we've worked together. So what were some of the things that, I didn't even get really, let me just share with our listeners some of the things that were the answers to how to deal with this, and then I'm going to come back to you in a moment. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So some of the things that, were the answers to how to deal with this is after years of all the therapy and Overeaters Anonymous and every other thing that they had sent me to, it turned out that, I realized I needed to go a different direction. I needed to do some self-improvement and change the way I was thinking. And I ended up doing some studying with Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dwyer and Andy Andrews and hundreds of other people, where I decided that if you can't change the people around you, change the people around you. And I needed to really break some ties with people that weren't serving me anymore, and also to be able to make the biggest differences were about me making better decisions. And this is where I came out with the 7 secrets to overcoming self-sabotage to live a healthier, happier life. And some of those secrets really came about with acknowledging the fear or doubt, and acknowledging that you're having challenges and what's going on with you at that moment, and being okay with it. A lot of people just don't want to take responsibility for what's going on, but acknowledging that you feel like you're not good enough or you're not being loved, and what's holding you back. Because if you don't identify the real problem, you're working around everything else. And that becomes when we're at the victim stage, where we're thinking, I'm a victim, it's happening to me, and why me versus why not me, and move on. So that was the first thing, acknowledging it. And then the second one is taking inventory of life's lessons. And, when I looked at some of the stuff, I was living a life of fear. I was afraid of, my dad's a wonderful man, but when I was growing up, I was scared of him. He wanted perfect children. I didn't know how to be perfect. I did everything in my power to be perfect, but still never measured up to the standard I thought I needed to be. And, it was like never enough, but I knew there was a couple of pieces. Like my family said you had to go out and get a good job and do everything else, and when you'd make 6 figures, you'd be enough type of thing. So by the time I was 23 years old, I was making 6 figures, because then I felt like, okay, now I'm enough. Now they're going to love me. And it always came to that point. And, there was all these different things with life lessons that I realized guided me. And whereas some of the life lessons, they're not necessarily bad, it's how we use them. And for me, a lot of the times, I was using them to disempower me instead of to empower me. And then the third one, and this is all in my book, The 7 Secrets of Overcoming Self-Sabotage, Define to Fab, and it became a #1 bestseller. You can get it on amillionproducts.com. That's A as in Apple, millionproducts.com. You can now get the book. But the third one was breaking through toxic emotions and meanings. And I had so many negative meanings with everything. I mean, whether it be somebody calling me a name and and I ended up living that identity, or believing that, if I did something or looked a certain way, it meant something. And there was a lot of attachments to things where if somebody looked at me the wrong way, I felt bad about myself. And when Heidi just said this before, is like breaking the trance, where we had, I had a lot of bad habits and good habits, and, bad habits cause immediate benefit, but long-term repetition. Like right now, I get to eat and I feel better, but long-term, I'm going to not help my health. I'm going to be sick, all these other things. Good habits cause immediate long-term benefits. So understanding the difference is usually the bad habits come from unconscious behaviors, and that's where that reaction, that impulse was coming from that I was describing before. And then finally you look at uncovering unconscious patterns. And when I got licensed as a master NLP practitioner, I've been studying this for 20 years, it was amazing how much power our language has on how we think. and understanding the rules and associations that we put with everything was critical. So learning how to stop looking for others for happiness and to stop using excuses to kind of pacify ourselves, but really to create more empowering beliefs and more empowering questions was a key thing to changing it. And then stop waiting for perfection. I love how so many people are looking for perfection in their lives, and yet there's no such thing. The word just doesn't exist. So because we're looking for perfection, we end up dealing with shame and guilt and frustration and depression because we never measure up. And then we end up making things bigger than they are, and we blame others for our troubles, or we procrastinate. So getting past that and just doing, and just really, for me, I always said strive for imperfection. It's so much better because I can do that and I can achieve that very well. And, that's a better state to be in. And then the last one for the 7 secrets of overcoming self-sabotage was making peace and practicing gratitude and celebrating. And making peace with everything. I realized today that everyone in my life did the best they can at that moment. And at the time, I didn't think they were doing the best because I had a different standard I thought that should have been done. And I needed to start, changing that feeling instead of living in anger and regret and all the other stuff. I needed to let go of it too. One of my mom's boyfriend always said, hate only hurts the person carrying it. And so true is that, because people go on with their lives, but we hold on to the stories and the toxicity and everything else that goes there. And then practicing gratitude. People think that I'll be grateful when I get this. You know what? You'll get it when you're grateful. It's a big difference. And the one thing I had the hardest time in my life doing is ever being okay with where I was. I always thought I had to be somewhere else. So practicing gratitude, but celebrating the victory. And I know that the ladies on the call know me well enough that I celebrate everything. I saw a flower, yay. I talked to someone and smiled today, yay. If I had a great day, yay. If I got to talk to a friend, I talked to my mom, I'm with my husband every day. I'm grateful all the time, but I celebrate everything I have, because it becomes a muscle that you exercise. Most people are good at complaining, but they're not good at celebrating. And then the other piece that I ended up realizing from all the experience and what were the keys to even make it so I can have the 20 years of abstinence from hurting myself was the 5 keys to eat for life. And that is going to be coming out in a new book. It's not out yet, but it's in the program that I teach with Find to Fab. And it's so much about just learning to eat for life and not using the food to fill the void, but to actually enjoy it, but to eat when you're sitting down, eat in a peaceful environment, eating without distractions. I mean, there's so many other variables, and also even eating for enjoyment. There's nothing wrong with enjoying what you're eating, but most of the time when we're eating to fill a need, we're inhaling. We're not eating. We're inhaling, and you don't even know what you ate because it was totally that knee-jerk reaction of filling the void. So with that being said, Jessica, was there anything that you wanted to share was your biggest takeaway that has helped you?
Well, what's really helped me the most is I was one of those people who fell into the victim. And it wasn't that I was like, oh, why me? It's more that it's what I told myself. How could you mess up? How could you do this? How could you disappoint this person? Why did you say yes to something you really meant no? And I didn't put myself first. And part of what I walked away with this is, for me, the biggest thing throughout this was knowing that I really am a fabulous person. And that I married a wonderful man, and I'm very happy. And he didn't make a mistake. Because somewhere along the line mentally, I was thinking that if he really got to know me, and it's been 17 years, if he really got to know me, he'd realize he had made a mistake. And I realized that, no, that's not the truth. He didn't make a mistake. He married somebody who was his equal and his partner.
He saw what you didn't see.
He saw what I didn't see, what I didn't allow myself to see.
Absolutely.
And that view of myself, and that, there's days, because it was a long-time habit. But that stuff sustains me, because I go, you're just falling into the old stuff, quit it.
Great. Yay.
I'll be honest, I wake up in the morning and the track starts. And then I'm like, just stop that. None of this is true.
Right.
And so
it's having that gift to even acknowledge and recognize, to say stop. And some people never even get there because they just let the old tape play over and over again. And that's where it perpetuates, and they live in this insidious deal of beating themselves up and never actually achieving anything that they really wanted. And I know for you, a big part is also being a role model for your kids because, I think all of us learn from the people who raise us. And the studies show that 55% of our beliefs are developed by the time we're 5 years old. So the question comes is whoever was surrounding you at that point, you pretty much grew up with those stories and the beliefs. And unless we learn to change them as adults to make decisions of what's right for us, we're replaying a child's story. Because that's what we were when we heard it the first time. And even though those people are no longer in our lives, we, or maybe not presently, I don't mean they're gone, but not presently living with you every moment, we tend to carry them with us. And that's the piece that most people don't realize, is that we're telling a story that isn't even ours. And we didn't even realize that we had the rights to be an editor, a producer, a creator of our own story. And that's really the beauty of what we have today. Now, a lot of people don't know, and I'm going to actually be closing up in a moment because our time just went really fast. I'm excited, ladies, you joined me. And but a lot of people don't even know where Find to Fab came from. And honestly, it was just so many years of people asking me how I was doing. How are you doing? How are you doing? And finally, one day, I said, I'm fine. And they said, because I kept answering, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And they said, what do you mean fine? I said, I'm effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. I'm fine. Leave me alone. And it just became such a joke over the years because anytime I'd answer fine, even years later when I was doing well and life got back on track and I was moving forward and into where I am today, and people say, how are you? And if I turned around and said fine, they'd turn around back to me. If they were old friends or family, they'd say, which one, yours or mine? And I'd say, no, you're fine. I'm fab. I'm fabulous, awesome, beautiful. And that was a big part of where Find to Fab came from, is because I spent years being fine. And the part for me is that there are so many women and men out there that actually are living in fine. They're living and feeling effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And every one of you out there are fab. You're fabulous, awesome, beautiful. And you deserve to live that in the moment and to feel great about yourself, because just being here, just being born, realize that you are already special. You have already exceeded odds that most people have never done. You have beat every other sperm out in the that was there, millions and millions, and you became the chosen one to live this life. And your only job is to be the best you can be, not to compete, not to be better than anybody else, but be the best you can be. And in doing that, you can give the gift to somebody else. And you don't know, your presence alone will make the difference to someone you smile at, you put your hand out to, you're just there for, or something that you end up doing that becomes a vehicle and a conduit that will change someone's life. So if we just take that and make the movement to help other people reclaim their inner peace and power, we've all done our job here on earth. And that is really to help others. And that's been the gift of being part of Find to Fab and the show. I am your trusted guide from your journey from Find to Fab. I want to thank you all for joining us and being part of this. If you'd like to follow me, you can do so on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. If you want to be part of everything going on, be sure to text 90210 and text Find to Fab to 90210. Join our list. Be notified of the calls and the videos and the radio show and everything else that's going on. And we look forward to having you be fab. Have an awesome day. Thank you, ladies.
When I see your face, there's not a thing that I would change, 'cause you're amazing.
Hey there, this is your life talking to you. Yes, I know it's unusual. You think that you are just living your life, but now here I am. I just had to speak up if you and I are going to have the best. Yes, you've had some success with me, but you know things could be better. I know how tough it's been to fight depression and the habits that lead you to self-sabotage and disordered eating. I applaud you for all the professional and self-help remedies that you have tried so far. But let's face it, they haven't worked. But it's not your fault. I know. I was there, remember? It's time that you listen to me for a change. I want you to go to www.findtofabshow.com and find out how best-selling author Lisa Lieberman-Wang can make me, your life, fabulous. Right now, Lisa is offering a 10-week transformational program for us. Mention the show, and we'll get a really great discount. Hey, I'd go online and do it for us, but I don't have any fingers. So go ahead and go to www.findtofabshow.com and let's make the changes we need today so we can have a better tomorrow.